Hello, welcome back to the podcast You're Better Than That with me, Hannah Miller. And today I have got Zoe and Laura with me.
Hello.
We thought we'd have a triple act today for this episode. Now, I'm going to see if you can guess what this episode is about. Do you know the word acrasia?
No, I don't.
I don't either.
No, you probably wouldn't know that because we're not, I think it's Greek. But the word acrasia means acting against our better judgment, doing something, behaving in a way, even though we don't think it's for our best. And so today I thought I did think we may not ever get around to this topic, lol, but we're going to talk about procrastination.
Ooh.
Okay, so if you have been following on socials, you'll see that I asked everybody about this because I thought hive mind experiences, different perspectives would be really, really good. And that's why I thought both of you being here would be good because we're different from one another. So first of all, do you procrastinate? Yes, sometimes, never. You too.
Yes.
I do.
I do.
I feel like most people do, right?
Yeah, well, our little data suggests they do. 56% of people said yes a lot. Another 35% yes quite often. So that's like 90%. That adds up to 91 actually. Only 2% said never. So they are unusual. So the vast majority of us do. What sort of things do we procrastinate? What about you two? What do you procrastinate? You though, and then you, Laura.
I like to win, and so I procrastinate doing things that I know that I might not necessarily win, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I like to do things that I'm good at, and if I know I'm not going to be very good at it, I'll procrastinate.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and I think I'm similar, but I don't like to get things wrong. So if I know, kind of like, I probably wouldn't use like the word win, but if I know I'm not going to be really good at it, or if I feel like, what if I get something wrong or I'm not good enough, that's when I can procrastinate things.
Yeah. I think I am more of a general procrastinator because I think I find myself wanting to do things that make me feel a little bit under pressure. But people said all sorts of things that they procrastinate. They said they procrastinate everything. Some people said that. Stuff they don't want to do, like boring stuff. I don't know whether you two procrastinate the boring stuff. I definitely might put off the least favourite task of the day till towards the end of it, which I know all the like productivity gurus would say otherwise. But I do find myself doing my favourite things and then in the last hour, pushing myself to do the thing I've really got to do because a client needs it, but I didn't want to. Some people procrastinate the stuff they're stuck on, the stuff that gives them no joy, the boring things. Some people just procrastinate the getting started. I don't know whether you can think about that, Laura, with your recent degree. It's sometimes the getting going, isn't it, with writing or researching that's hard.
Definitely. And I think when you're looking down the line at something, and that's one thing, is when you look at something as a whole, that's probably not the best thing to do. It's better to break things down.
Break it down.
When you see an assignment, or for me, third year of uni, I'm looking at like 15 assignments in my year, and working and life and everything else. It's like, I am not going to be able to do that. Therefore, I'm going to hide in a hole and not think about it.
And not do it. Yeah, definitely. Some people said they procrastinated the stuff they might fail, which is what you two said, or they procrastinate decision making. So a bit of decision paralysis. If I make a decision, then I've shut everything else off. So I'll procrastinate making the decision so that I keep options open. Some people said they put off the more challenging stuff, especially when their mental load is high. So they just try and tick through tasks. Definitely think I do that. Sometimes I get stuck in email because it gives that feeling of I've been productive when really I've just procrastinated the stuff that I really needed to do. How about this one? Putting off confronting poor behaviour in others or having challenging conflicts. Now, I think we might have some difference of opinion here.
I don't procrastinate that.
No.
I don't feel... I don't run towards conflict, but I also don't run away from it. And so I'd be quite happy to just hit something on the head and just do it. What do you think?
What about you, Laura?
I think I might be the opposite. Yeah, I think I'm definitely more of a put my head in the sand sort of person, which is not great, and I am trying to get better at it. And actually Zoe and Hannah help me with that as well, and sometimes they give me words to say and strategies and things like that, which is so helpful to draw on other people when you're definitely someone who's a bit more like doopy doo.
Yeah, we'll pretend it's not happening. I don't need to talk about it. I don't need to talk about it. It's a really interesting. I mean, we need to do an actual episode on challenging conversations, I think. But if often when we don't confront that small thing, we wish we had, because it becomes a much bigger thing, doesn't it? And that's like most of this stuff. It's like when we put off revision for an exam, we then have this impending doom that Tim Urban calls the panic monster that just then appears because we put it off for so long. The panic monster's in there, and we just then sometimes freeze and don't get anything done.
But we know that the end result will be like good for us. So then I think, why do we do it? Why do we do it to ourselves? For example, for an exam, if someone was to procrastinate, you know that revising will make it easier for you. Like, why do we do it to ourselves?
Exactly. And I think the what then that we've just covered, the why do we do it, I think is a really, really good question. Why do we think we do it? And I think this is why so many people procrastinate, is because actually there's loads of reasons why. Again, what are your whys? Laura, why do you think you procrastinate?
As I said before, definitely the like, I don't want to get it wrong. I want to do it really well. And so if I can't, then I just won't bother. I think another one is overwhelm and feeling like, so using last year as an example, working, finishing my degree, family illness, lots of stuff going on, and just feeling like, oh my gosh, the thought of washing my car or having to pay that bill or do that email, or all of that life admin stuff that can just creep in and get on top of you. I just remember feeling like the walls are caving in. I don't know where to start, and I just want to be left alone. Everyone leave me alone. That was the feeling of just like, where do I start? And I think it's overwhelm, definitely.
Yeah, good.
I would say probably a bit similar, but then also I resonate with the boredom thing as well. If I think I'm going to be bored, then I'd rather just push it down the line. And I know it's not good for me because I'll have to do it at some point. But probably that, and then, kind of similar to what I said at the start of I want to be good.
Yeah, only do it if I know the outcome is going to be good.
Exactly.
And if I don't think, then maybe I won't.
Yeah. What would you say?
Well, a few other things that kind of came up for me. I definitely think I am probably at heart a bit of a pleasure seeker, although I don't really live that out now, but I think I will always go for what I think's fun. So if I don't think it's fun, I have to have something else that causes me to do it, which is then a deadline. And so I will maybe procrastinate things I think are boring. Some people mention the menopause actually being something that impacted their procrastination. Sometimes it is just plain lazy behaviour, or there could be some anxiety behind it. Avoidance, some people are avoiders, some people go crashing in. Some people do it because they know they then get motivation from the procrastination and they kind of see how it works for them, which I fully get. I like a bit of pressure, and we joke about this, don't we? Like Laura will sometimes be having like passive anxiety because I'm planning a workshop and the time frame is quite tight for it, and by personality you wouldn't particularly thrive off that.
Never in a million years.
No. And I kind of love that slight feeling of I've got to be pressed, I've got to kind of be sharp. So I think actually what kind of has helped me in this conversation and taking the research from people, you know, a few other things people said was, I don't know enough, I haven't got the information I need, I don't have the confidence, I've got too many things going on, I think I might fail, I don't think I'll win, it's boring. I think there is a personality element to this, which of course I'm going to bring up because we love to talk about that. And as people will know who are listening, we use Clifton Strengths, we use the Strengths Finder profile. And I think that there's clues in your profile as to if and why you might procrastinate. Because even people with lots of executing strengths might procrastinate if their executing strengths mean that they like to do things diligently to the best of their ability, to not drop the ball, even though their nature likes a plan and they like to do things. And then you've got the actual personalities that are very flexible. So the people with adaptability higher are going to be a little bit more go with the flow and will probably find themselves working up to a deadline. Then the learners, the people who've got those kind of strengths, they won't want to act until they know what they're talking about. Deliberative people who want to be sure they've thought about every option. So I think, you've got to know yourself to kind of know a little bit of the root as to why you might be procrastinating. And sometimes we think we use this word procrastination, and we all know what that is, but we don't necessarily know why we're doing it, because we think everyone's procrastinating for the same reason, whereas actually my reasons are really different to you two. I'm not sure I particularly procrastinate because I don't think I'm going to win or it's going to be brilliant. I think I might procrastinate because it feels like, a bit of a, this feels like a meaty task, and I'm not sure I can be bothered to put the mental effort in that's necessary. And we all know it's the start of something like that that's the hardest. Like planning a workshop, I love the idea generation, but then like getting down into the detail part, that's the bit I procrastinate because I don't like doing it. So I think that knowing personality really, really helps to help us think about why we do it. And I think you've got to know why you do something in order to stop doing it.
Yeah, that's true.
But otherwise you'll just go, I've got to stop procrastinating. And how can you put some methods in place that help? I think also that perfectionism plays a part in this. So in a book I was reading recently, it talks about how perfectionism can bring about paralysis, which of course then is a form of procrastination. It's not the same as like boredom procrastination. It's more just the perfectionism. And there's a great story I heard about a guy called Shiraz, who was from Persia. And he was an architect like many years ago, and he created the most beautiful, perfect, unbelievable blueprint for this mosque. And everyone was like, oh my goodness, this is the most incredible we have ever seen. We must build this. It must be built. And apparently he locked himself in a room for 3 days with his plans, his blueprints, looking at the perfection within them, and then burnt them. And I look at that for a brilliant reaction. There was a sharp intake of breath. They didn't know that story. Don't panic, Pax. That's the dog. The reason he did that was because he did not want anybody to try and build it and it not meet the standard. So he would rather it was burnt.
Oh my goodness.
So it never got built. That is like perfectionism paralysis to the extreme. But inside there was like, if this can't be perfect, then it's not going anywhere. And we may not have, I've never created like the most perfect blueprint. But again, I'm sure between us and people listening will think, where have I not done something or not put something out there or procrastinated doing something even in the first place because I'm just worried it's not good enough. And how that can stop some great things coming into the world that aren't perfect.
But you're really good at this because you model learning as you go. So even with the podcast, there was a lot of learning to do, but then we could have easily said, oh, we're just not going to do a podcast until we know exactly what we're doing and whatnot. But you modeled, actually, it might not be perfect when you first start, but you will learn as you go. And then we didn't end up procrastinating launching because of that. So
yeah, I guess that's, again, like it's a personality thing, isn't it? My strengths aren't so good at the detail. They aren't so good at making something amazing. So somebody else needs to do that, like you guys. But maybe I can get the momentum in the first place to make sure that something doesn't just not happen, that it might do. Doesn't mean I don't want something to be excellent. But I think there's something around this perfectionism paralysis. And although that was an extreme example, how many times we step back from doing anything or making a decision because it might not be perfect. Some people find it really hard to do something like buy a new car or choose a new washing machine because the paralysis of how do I know I've bought the best one? And there's a difference between like taking your time to buy a new car or a new house, but taking the same amount of time over a washing machine. And there are people like that. You kind of have to think, what's the cost benefit analysis I've got to do for the amount of perfectionism I'm placing into these jobs? Do you ever feel you misplace the perfectionism and you spend too much time or thought on something that's not as important?
Definitely. I think that whole perfectionist trait I can definitely recognise within myself. I think, again, like thinking about last year with the degree, the amount of times that I would just put off starting my assignment because I didn't feel like I could do a good enough job. And I definitely felt paralysed with that fear of like, I remember actually going into the degree and saying to myself, if I don't come out of this with a first, then I'm not doing it. Like, it's pointless. I'm not doing it. And actually, I didn't come out of it with a first. I got a 2-1. But that learning process through those 3 years of actually, and Hannah, you really helped with done is better than perfect, and with all of those like techniques and thoughts. But actually, that learning process over the 3 years of letting go of that perfectionism and actually just starting and being, I think my confidence was built as you go along and feel like, maybe I don't have everything I need, but I'm going to do it anyway. And actually, the world is still turning. Everything's okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's a bit of an identity thing as well of, where do I place my identity? And it should not be in my grades or my
being
performance
perfect.
in things and in being perfect. I'm actually all right on my own. And yeah, the world does keep turning, even if you don't. I mean, I also think, saying something so like black and white and all or nothing as I'm not doing a degree if I don't get a first, that's really unhealthy. So yeah, I think definitely that's where I've grown over the past few years, and it's been really unhelpful to be so perfectionist about stuff like that.
The concept of perfect's I like just listening to you talk. It's just a ridiculous concept, actually. If you stop and it's a bit like an emperor's new clothes, isn't it? If you stop and think, I won't do this till it's perfect, we're never going to do anything perfect. Like even the best podcaster, the best artist, the best chef, whatever, they're never going to reach perfection. And there are obviously some jobs and roles where perfectionism is like important. So like if you're a Michelin star chef, there is a level of attention to detail that's really important. But I imagine even people like that have to learn to live with a bit of dissonance around what they actually produce and what perfect is, because perfect just obviously doesn't exist.
That's so true.
It's a bit mad when we stop and think about whatever our ideals. I think probably more than perfect outcomes, I probably have perfect ideals around what I should be able to do. And that probably is a different kind of perfectionism that comes out for me around, being able to do and be everything. So I guess as we talk about procrastination, we've got to think about what helps us to stop and what strategies can people put in place. So, we recognise most of us do it, and we probably will do it, and we'll continue to do it. So what are the things that we can do that help us to stop? I think, again, if I just name some of the things that people mentioned. Actually, there's one more thing I want to say before we talk about what makes it stop. Sorry, can we go back? Reverse. I think it's important to think, I read that one of the things around procrastination is that it's all tied to an emotion. It's not tied to a task, it's tied to an emotion. And asking yourself, what is the emotion that I'm trying to avoid here? So why am I procrastinating, and what is the emotion that is underneath it? So that emotion could be boredom, it could be anxiety, it could be a fear, it could be a lack of control. But what is the emotion that is underneath the behaviour? Because until you diagnose that, you can't do something to make it stop. And that could just be simply the emotion of, I don't know, overwhelm or boredom or whatever. But I think until you know what's causing you to do a certain behaviour, how can you possibly begin to put a strategy in place? Because your strategy won't work. But some of the things that people did say that helped them is to learn to use your personality and your drivers for your good. I know that external deadlines, not self-imposed ones, they do not work at all. I am total self-sabotager, but external deadlines, either real or fake, make a big difference for me. That, like, if you two say to me, can you do this by then? I'll do it, don't you? It will happen. But if I say I'm going to do that by then, I won't. So I have learned to work with my behaviours to help me do stuff. What helps you stop?
Maybe kind of similar for me, but accountability. Not necessarily the deadline piece, but just saying to someone, this is what I'm doing today, really helps me, because I guess it is similar, but I don't want to let you down, and I want to I think it comes back to my strengths of competition. I want to win the day, and winning the day is like ticking off what I said I was going to do. So I'm just thinking very practically, making a list and
going through it chronologically and placing the things that you don't really want to do at the start.
Yeah.
But I try and be quite disciplined in trying to stick to it chronologically. And actually, I always am amazed at how quickly I can get through those things when I do it that way. My top strength is achiever, so I can kind of see how that would work. But yeah,
That's
I think
really
making
good.
a list and being quite like, come on, let's get those things done first, and doing things I find earlier in the morning as well. So one thing that Hannah and Zoe always laugh at me about is how I hate phone calls. I just cannot cope. I will be thinking about a phone call I've got to make in like 3 weeks' time and having heart palpitations about it. But just thinking, so for example, I've got a wedding to plan this year, and I'm like, whoop, whoop, and I'm just thinking,
Her own wedding, just to be clear.
my own wedding, not just a wedding. And just thinking like, oh my gosh, I've got to make phone calls with my voice to human beings about plans and things. And I'm like, do you know what? I didn't need a wedding dress anyway. I can just go without. But just thinking, if I put it on my list and make sure I do it maybe early in the morning straight away and just get it over with, and then I can have that sense of achievement afterwards, rather than feeling sick the whole day worrying about it.
Yeah, it's really
just
good.
Getting it done.
Really, really good. I think that whole get it done is a really good, do the hard thing first is a really good mentality. And you're right, there are so many things that we put off. There was something I put off recently, I can't actually remember what it was, and I thought, oh my goodness, that was such a small job. It was something we had to do for work, and I thought, I've done it. It took 10 minutes, but I'd got it in my head that it was going to be this massive, challenging thing to do, and it's often nowhere near as bad as we think. So simply telling others, getting external deadlines, doing it first, those are all really good things. I think sometimes when you know there's a consequence for others, it can help. Sometimes thinking my bit in the chain is going to impact other people, that's an okay reason to want to please other people. If you realise that your behaviour directly impacts somebody else's, like, that's good to realise that and to therefore do the thing. Some people talked about having methods around their time, like using the Pomodoro method, so they do 25-minute chunks, or rewarding themselves for doing something. Maybe you could let yourself have your favourite chocolates, Laura, after you do those phone calls.
I already do that anyway.
Yeah, I know you do. So that's we're going to have to hide your favourite chocolates from you. And I think doing something that helps you bring you back to yourself. So if you've had to do something that you find really difficult, like loads of life admin, and that's really not your bag, then allowing yourself one of your favourite things to do that really does bring you back to yourself, whether it's writing, singing, drawing, running, whatever that might be for you, I think is a good method to think about. Some people talked about having a shower first, or doing something to like break the deadlock of the procrastination or the freeze, and then allowing yourself, to go again and to go straight into it. I think there's a couple of other more practical things I want to mention as well that we can take from this whole topic. One is, going back to the paralysis, is there's something to be said for settling. When it comes to decision making or thinking something through, settling I don't mean settling for a life that's not worth living or a second best, but we do have to settle for the decision that we make. There's some really interesting research around this. There was a psychological study where two groups of people were given the opportunity to have a piece of artwork from a gallery, like a print. And the first group of people were told you can pick something and you've got a month to change your mind. The second group of people were told you've got to pick and you've got to stick with your decision. The second group demonstrated way less. They demonstrated less anxiety and higher satisfaction with their choice because the decisions were then cut off.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like, if you use your wedding dress example, it can get harder the more choice that you have, because you become more, if you go to 10 shops, it gets more and more difficult because I've got so much to choose. Whereas if you limit sometimes choice, that's why they say actually lifelong partners, people who are in lifelong marriages or relationships, because you've settled and made a decision, you are removing other choice, and they're happier because of it. So I think there's something to take from that when we're trying to make a decision and we've got procrastination around decision making. How can we settle for what we have, or settle for the decision we make, knowing that there will be other decisions out there that actually we just can't make because we've made this one, and this is the decision I've made. And actually leaning into that study and thinking, I will be more at peace if I just make the decision than if I keep it open.
That's So true.
Yeah, it's really, really, really good. And kind of having that joy of knowing I'm missing out on other things is really, really important. There's another thing around prioritizing and learning to procrastinate. If we're all going to procrastinate, apart from maybe 2% of us, we need to think about what we're going to procrastinate so that we can focus on what matters. You'll know this story. You may well have heard it. It's a really, really good analogy of somebody bringing in a jar, and they've got rocks and they've got pebbles and they've got sand. And they tell the group in front of them, we've got to get all of this into the jar. And so if you put the sand in, and then if you put the pebbles in, and then you put the rocks in, you can't fit everything in the jar. But you'll know this, but if you put the rocks in first, then you sprinkle the pebbles around the rocks and then the sand around that, then everything magically fits in the same jar. And the principle there is about put the rocks in first. And I think that is a really, really good principle. But the problem is most of us have too many rocks. So even though we're being told this is a really great, this is a great method, and I agree that the rocks have to go in first, otherwise they won't happen, because we just don't prioritise them and all the other bits take up unending amounts of time. There is another part to that, which is that we probably have too many rocks. Yeah. And so deciding what our absolute priorities are, I think, is really, really important. And I am really struggling with this as a concept. How do you get down to a number of priorities that actually work for your life? There's another story. Warren Buffett, who is a very famous entrepreneur and social philanthropist, he was asked about how do you do this? Essentially, how do you fit all the rocks in? I don't know whether the story's true, but it's credited to him. And apparently what he said was that you should write a list of the top 25 things in your life that matter to you. Okay, so family, exercise, health, maybe is a better word than exercise, whatever they might be for you, spirituality, progress in my work, 25 things. And then he said, decide what your top 5 are and focus on those. And the thing is, then you would think that you would then say, and then the other 20 you fit in when you've got a chance. But actually what Warren Buffett said was the other 20 you ruthlessly ignore.
Wow.
And I think that's profound, but also flip. Yeah. What? So I was listening to somebody retell this story the other day when I was in the car, and I was thinking, what would be my top 5? And what are the 20 things I've got to ruthlessly ignore? I don't even know how to begin with that question. I mean, there's a couple that are obvious, like family and faith, like those 2 gone. So what are my other 3 essentially going to be? If those 2 are non-negotiables, I've got 3 left, right?
But I imagine we would live so differently if we just knew what those top 5 were and allowed ourselves to kind of, I don't know, niche into one thing so that we're not like juggling so many things and feeling the need to like procrastinate and do all. Yeah, exactly.
I'd love to ask him what the 20 things were that he ignored. I'd love to know what the examples are of the kind of things to ignore. But I thought it was profoundly different around you've got to know what you're going to prioritize, and maybe there are some things we should procrastinate because they're not worth our time. Maybe we are doing things for the feeling of productivity or the feeling of getting it done, and maybe we just never needed to get it done anyway, or it wasn't important for us to do. So perhaps there's good procrastination, which is we should procrastinate the things that are not mission critical for us to do. Now, I haven't resolved this, but that story, every time I hear it, makes me go, what are my 5? And probably there's things within that 20 I'm currently prioritizing that I need to learn to ruthlessly ignore. Like literally, because what Warren's trying to say is that the other things you do just ignore anyway. So the things underneath the 25 you are going to ignore. So nobody needs to tell you to forget about those, because I'm not ruthlessly pursuing owning a sports car because I'm not bothered about owning one. So I don't need to eliminate that because I'm not doing it. But there'll be things that are attractive to me. But then am I going to be brilliant at focusing on those 5 if the other 20 are hanging on?
That's true.
What do you think?
I think I might procrastinate figuring out what my top 5 are.
Touche. Okay, one last other thought I just want to leave you with is one thing that James Clear said. We talk about present self and future self. And your future self is where you make the good decisions about what you do, and your present self just wants to reward yourself now. And the final thing for you to think about is you can't just activate future self. Some people are better at it than others, futuristic thinkers, and they think this is what I need down the future. My eldest son's good at that. You're good at that. So you are more future thinking for present self. But for most of us, James Clear says, activating future self in present self is very difficult because we can't imagine what future self needs. So he says you have to do something that rewards present self in order for future self to get what future self needs.
Yeah.
So the last thought I'd leave you with is when you're about to procrastinate, how do you use a strategy to allow your present self to be rewarded in such a way? I guess it's to do with habit tracking and all that kind of rewarding behavior so that our future self gets the outcomes that it needs.